The storm came in a way no one expected. Ethan had seen many storms in his lonely years on the broken earth, but this one felt different from the first drop of rain. It felt angry. It felt loud. It felt almost alive. The sky above him roared like a wild beast as dark clouds rolled across the valley, swallowing the last bit of weak sunset light. The world changed in seconds, turning from calm to chaos. Ethan hurried back toward his shelter, the place he built from old metal plates, broken pipes, and scraps he had collected. It was small, cold, and ugly, but it was home. It kept him safe. It reminded him he was still alive, even when everything else around him felt dead. The wind pushed at his back as if trying to knock him down. His boots slipped in the mud, water splashing around his legs. Lightning tore across the sky, lighting up the valley for an instant. In that brief flash, Ethan saw the truth. The storm was stronger than anything he had survived before. Trees bent like they were made of paper. Rocks rolled down the hillsides. The world itself seemed to scream. He reached the shelter and slammed the metal door shut. Rain hammered against the roof, loud enough to make his ears ring. The walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The whole structure groaned like it was afraid it wouldn't survive the night. Ethan sat on an old crate, pulling a thin blanket around his shoulders. Cold air slipped through the cracks in the metal, but he was used to it. He had been alone a long time, too long. Sometimes he wondered if he was the last human still breathing. Sometimes he wondered if he would ever speak to another living soul again. Another rumble of thunder shook the air. The storm didn't sound like weather. It sounded like a monster outside, angry that it couldn't reach him. He closed his eyes, taking slow breaths, trying to calm his heart. But then he heard something else. A crash. Not thunder. Not wind. Something heavy, something real. He froze. His hand slowly reached for the rusted metal pipe he kept for protection. He listened, every muscle going tight. The storm's roar seemed to fade for a moment, replaced by another sound, a thud, like something stumbling against the side of the shelter. Ethan stood up, heart racing. "Who's there?" he whispered, though he knew no one would answer. There were no people left here, and animals didn't try to open doors. Another thud. Then a scraping sound. Then the door burst open. Wind and rain exploded inside, knocking Ethan back a step. The storm crashed into the room like a living thing, but it wasn't the storm that took his breath away. It was the figure standing in the doorway. Tall, glowing faintly, wounded, an alien. Her form was unfamiliar, elegant and fierce at the same time. Her skin shimmered like wet metal under the lightning. She held one arm tightly against her side, silver-blue blood dripping between her fingers. Her armor was cracked, burnt, and torn, as if she had been fighting something brutal. She looked terrified, but when her eyes met Ethan, she stopped moving completely. Their world froze. The storm no longer mattered. Ethan felt his heart hammering against his ribs. He had heard stories about aliens long ago, back when humanity was stronger, back when the skis were full of battles. But he had never seen one, not until now. Not until she stood barely 2 steps away from him, soaked, injured, and staring at him like he was the most unexpected thing in the universe. She did not attack. She did not run. She simply stared, as if she could not believe what she was seeing. Ethan raised his hand slowly, showing he had no weapon ready. His pipe lay forgotten on the floor beside him. "It's okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if she understood his language. "I'm not going to hurt you." Her glowing eyes flickered. Her chest rose and fell in fast, painful breaths. She looked around the shelter, then back at him. Lightning flashed again behind her, outlining her silhouette in bright white light. And then, as if her strength finally ran out, her legs gave way. She collapsed onto one knee, trembling. Rain poured in through the broken doorway. The storm screamed outside. But all Ethan saw was the alien woman kneeling, bleeding, and terrified. And that was the moment everything changed. Ethan froze as he watched her trembling on the wet floor. His instincts told him to stay back, to wait for some trick, some attack. But the fear in her glowing eyes told him a different story. This creature, strange and beautiful, was not here to harm him. She was as scared as he was, maybe more. Her chest rose and fell quickly, and her breathing sounded sharp, like she had been running for hours. He stepped closer slowly, careful not to frighten her more. The rain and storm howled behind them, but inside the shelter there was a strange quiet. Just the sound of the woman's heavy breaths and Ethan's own heartbeat thumping like a drum. He dropped to one knee beside her, keeping his hands visible calm. He could see the blood on her arm, the tear in her armor. She was hurt badly. I can help," Ethan said softly. He tore a strip from the thin blanket he always carried and reached toward her wound. She flinched at the touch, her glowing eyes wide, but she did not move away. The storm outside seemed far away now, unimportant. All that mattered was the alien woman in front of him, fragile and hurting. "You help?" she asked in broken English, her voice musical but strained. It was halting, careful, like she had never spoken to a human before. Her accent was strange, almost like a song of the stars. Ethan nodded. "Yes, I help," he repeated. His hands were gentle as he pressed the damp cloth against her wound. She hissed softly, a sound neither a human nor a cat would make, but she let him hold it there. He could feel the warmth of her skin against his hand, faint and glowing like moonlight on water. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Ethan could see the fear in her eyes slowly melting into something else. Caution, curiosity, perhaps even trust. He had spent months alone, talking only to the wind and broken machines, and yet here was a living being, an entirely different species, sitting before him in need of help. And somehow he felt connected. "I name," she said slowly. Her tongue rolled words differently, and she paused as if thinking in a different language. "Saria." "Saria," Ethan repeated. The name felt like a song. He gave her a small, reassuring nod. "I'm Ethan." She tilted her head, studying him. The glowing eyes that had frightened him a moment ago now looked thoughtful. She had expected hostility, perhaps, or the smell of death. But what she saw instead was a human, rough and ragged, but not dangerous. Not yet. The fire in the small stove flickered as Ethan fed it with scraps of wood. The glow of the flames illuminated Saria's form, highlighting the beauty in the strange curves of her alien body, the soft luminescence of her skin, and the fine cuts on her hands. For the first time, Ethan realized how alone he had been, not just in the physical sense, but in the sense of truly seeing someone, truly connecting. "You hurt?" he asked gently. She nodded, her glowing eyes flickering with pain. Ethan moved closer, careful not to crowd her. He tore a larger strip of cloth from his blanket and wrapped it around the wound. She hissed again, but did not resist. "I predator," she said finally, her voice trembling. "They hunting." She gestured vaguely at the storm outside, though he could not see clearly what she meant. His stomach tightened. Whatever had chased her here was still out there, waiting in the dark. Ethan's mind raced. He was just a human, tired, alone, and ragged, but he had survived for a reason. And now he realized that reason included protecting this alien woman. She was not a threat. She was not a weapon. She was a living being, alone and frightened, and if he didn't help her, he didn't want to think about it. Saria's gaze held his for a long, long moment. There was caution, yes, but also something else, amazement. She had seen humans before, perhaps in stories, perhaps in warnings. But this human, this man, did not fit the image. His hands were calloused, yes, and his clothes were tattered, but his eyes held patience. His eyes held kindness, and for that she did not know how to respond. The storm continued outside, relentless, but inside the shelter a fragile bond had begun to form. A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable, but full of questions. Could a human and an alien survive together? Could two beings from entirely different worlds understand each other enough to trust, to care, to protect? Saria finally leaned back slightly, letting Ethan help her to sit more comfortably. She still hissed in pain every time he moved the cloth, but she did not pull away. In that simple act, they shared something more than words. They shared a recognition of life, of struggle, of hope. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, two beings, one human, one alien, sat together in quiet. And for the first time in months, Ethan felt that the world, broken and violent as it was, might still hold something worth fighting for. The fire crackled softly in the corner of the small shelter. Ethan sat near it, rubbing his hands to warm them. Saria leaned against the wall, her glowing skin dimmed slightly in exhaustion, but her eyes still held a sharp intelligence. The storm had faded to a soft drizzle, and the valley outside looked gray and silent. Yet inside, the air was thick with tension, curiosity, and a fragile trust that had begun to grow between them. Saria's breathing was still uneven, but she finally spoke, her voice quiet and careful. "Ship crashed," she said. "I separated from team." She paused, her glowing eyes darting to Ethan as if gauging whether he would understand. "Predator hunting must hide." Ethan nodded slowly. He had survived predators before, wild animals, raiders, even desperate humans, but he had never seen anything like what this alien woman described. He could see the fear in her face, and it was real. "You're safe here," he said gently. "I'll keep you safe." She looked at him, and for a moment her glowing eyes softened. It was strange and beautiful. There was something in her expression that suggested disbelief, a mix of relief and astonishment. "You help, even human," she trailed off, uncertain how to say the words she meant. "Yes," Ethan said simply. "I help. Doesn't matter if you're alien, you need help, that's enough." Her lips curved faintly in a small, almost shy gesture, something close to a smile. Ethan could see her hand trembling as it rested against the blanket he had wrapped around her wound. Her armor was torn and bent in strange angles, and the silver-blue blood from her injury left faint streaks on the cloth. He worked quietly, pulling the cloth tighter, careful not to hurt her further. "Why humans usually fight, not help," she said, her voice soft, hesitant, filled with genuine confusion. Ethan looked into her eyes, his own tired and scarred. "Some humans, yes, but not all. Some survive by helping each other. That's how we stay alive." His voice was steady, though inside he felt the weight of years alone pressing down on him. "I survived this long. I survived because I helped, and sometimes because someone helped me." Saria studied him for a long moment. Her glowing skin pulsed faintly with an inner light, reflecting the fire between them. She had been taught that humans were dangerous, unpredictable, violent. But this human was different. His words carried honesty, warmth, and something she had never expected to see in a member of his species: compassion. "I surprised," she admitted finally, almost whispering. "Human heart, strong, not only weapon." Her accent was thick, melodic, each word careful. She touched her chest lightly with a trembling hand, as if she were trying to understand the feeling in her own terms. Ethan smiled faintly. "We're not perfect, we make mistakes, but when it matters, some of us do the right thing." Saria's gaze softened even more. "You different, other humans cruel, you survive not just body, but heart." She paused. "You human worth." Her words faltered, but the meaning was clear. In her eyes he saw admiration, perhaps even something deeper, something that had nothing to do with survival or caution. The fire crackled again, filling the quiet gaps between them. Outside, the valley was gray and wet, but inside the shelter, two very different beings shared a moment of understanding that transcended language, culture, and species. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low, almost to himself. "I've been alone for a long time. Thought no one else was left, but maybe I'm wrong." He glanced at her, his eyes soft. "Maybe not alone anymore." Saria's glowing eyes flickered as she considered his words. She had lived her life among her own kind, trained for battle, taught to trust few, and now she was discovering something alien not only in the humans she feared, but in herself. The fear was still there, but now it was mingled with something new, something hopeful. "I must survive," she said quietly. "Must go home if possible." But even as she said it, her gaze lingered on Ethan. There was a quiet question in her eyes. Could this human, fragile as he seemed, be more than just a temporary shelter? Could he be a companion in a world that had become cold and dangerous? Ethan did not answer right away. Instead, he offered her a simple nod and handed her a small cup of warm water. "For now, rest," he said. "We figure out next step later." Saria accepted it, her fingers brushing his briefly. That touch, small and fleeting, carried more meaning than words. Gratitude, trust, perhaps even a hint of something else, something fragile and beautiful forming between them. The storm outside had quieted, but inside the shelter, the bond between human and alien had begun to grow. Two beings from entirely different worlds, one afraid and injured, one cautious but kind, found themselves connected in ways they could not yet explain. The fire flickered. The rain dripped from the roof, and for the first time in many nights, neither of them felt truly alone. The storm finally softened into a gentle drizzle, leaving the valley in a gray, cold silence. Ethan stepped outside the small shelter, letting the wet air wash over him. The mud clung to his boots, the wind still tugged at his tattered coat, and the valley looked empty and broken, yet peaceful compared to the chaos of hours before. Saria followed slowly, leaning against the wall for support, her glowing skin dim in the pale light. She moved carefully, each step cautious, as if the world outside was as dangerous as the storm that had just passed. Ethan had been alone for so long that even the quiet of the valley felt strange. And yet this silence brought no comfort. His mind raced. He had seen signs, broken trees, deep claw marks in the mud, strange noises during the storm, that something had been hunting Saria. Whatever had caused the wreck of her ship was not gone. Whatever had chased her here was still near, waiting, patient. Suddenly a low, guttural sound rose from the valley floor. Ethan stiffened. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end. It was deep and throaty, something alive, something enormous. Saria's head snapped up, her glowing eyes wide with recognition and fear. "It followed," she said, her voice trembling. Her words were quiet, but they carried weight. She did not need to explain more. Ethan already understood. He swallowed hard. "What is it?" His voice shook slightly, but he tried to sound steady. "A predator," she said. "It hunts anything that bleeds, faster, stronger, smarter than most prey. It kills." Her voice was almost a whisper, but each word carried the danger that Ethan could feel in his bones. Another growl echoed across the valley, closer this time. It was followed by a heavy, scraping sound. Ethan glanced toward the trees, toward the shadowed hills, and saw movement. A dark, massive shape was creeping through the mud, its form blurred by the rain and dim light. Its eyes, yellow and glowing, reflected the weak light. Its body was armored with bone-like plates. Its claws tore deep furrows in the ground. Ethan's heart pounded violently. He had faced danger before, but this was something beyond any human fight he had known. He glanced at Saria. Her face was pale, her glowing eyes intense. "We must run," she said firmly, though she sounded weak from injury. Ethan shook his head, disbelief flickering across his features. "No, you're hurt. You won't make it far." He stepped closer, putting a protective stance between her and the predator. His old instincts, the ones honed by months of survival, kicked in. He would not let this creature take her. Not here, not now. She stared at him in shock. "You stay, fight for me?" she asked. Her voice was a mix of fear and awe. Ethan swallowed hard, tightening his grip on the metal pipe he always carried. He could feel every scar, every old wound ache as his body prepared to fight. "I'm fighting," he said, his voice low and steady, "because you're in my home, because you're hurt, because you're not a monster." Her eyes softened in that moment, glowing faintly. For a second, the storm, the valley, the predator, it all seemed to fade. Only the small, fragile connection between them existed. She stepped closer to him, leaning slightly on the wall for support. "Then we fight together," she whispered. The predator howled, a bone-chilling sound that made the earth tremble. Its claws scraped against rocks and mud. Ethan tightened his grip on the pipe, feeling its weight and the roughness of the metal. Saria raised a hand, glowing faintly, her energy flickering with her exhaustion. Her eyes locked onto the approaching creature. Ethan knew the fight would not be easy. He was just a human, tired and alone, and Saria was injured. But neither of them had a choice. They could flee and die or stand and survive. His chest tightened. He had survived storms, predators, and the loneliness of a ruined world. He would not let this creature take the first thing that truly mattered to him in years. The creature slammed into a nearby tree, shaking the ground. Saria's energy flickered stronger, her glowing hand reaching out instinctively to defend herself. Ethan swung his pipe, the metal ringing against the wet ground, ready for whatever came next. Together, human and alien, they faced a predator that seemed unstoppable. And for the first time since the storm began, Ethan felt something rise inside him that he had thought was gone forever. Hope. Hope because he was not alone. Hope because together they might survive. Hope because for the first time in years the world, though broken, felt like it had a purpose again. The predator crashed through the underbrush with a force that made the earth tremble. Its roar was deafening, a deep, rattling sound that seemed to shake the bones of anyone who heard it. Ethan's heart pounded wildly in his chest, but he did not flinch. He tightened his grip on the rusted metal pipe, every scarred muscle ready to fight. Beside him, Saria's glowing skin pulsed faintly with energy, her hand lifted, trembling but determined. She was wounded, weak, yet ready to face the creature. The beast struck the shelter's door first. Metal groaned under its claws, wood splintered, and shards of rain-soaked debris flew into the small room. Ethan swung the pipe with all his strength, hitting the beast's jaw as it peeked inside. The creature snarled, its teeth glinting, yellow eyes focused on him. Pain shot through Ethan's arms, but he did not stop. He could feel his heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of Saria's energy pulses beside him. "Saria," he shouted over the roaring storm outside. "Now hit it." Her glowing hand released a bolt of blue energy that struck the beast squarely in the chest. Sparks flew, and the creature recoiled with a screech that rattled the shelter. But it was not finished. It lunged again, faster and more furious than before. Ethan jumped aside, swinging his pipe at its leg, connecting with a sickening thud. The creature faltered for a moment, letting out a hiss that sounded almost like pain. "We can do this," Ethan yelled, blood mixing with mud on his arms. He could feel the adrenaline burning in his veins. Every scar, every hardship he had survived, the storms, the hunger, the lonely nights, had led to this. Now he was not alone. For the first time in years, he had a partner, someone fighting beside him, someone whose life mattered as much as his own. Saria gritted her teeth. Another bolt of energy surged from her hand, cutting through the rain and hitting the beast again. It staggered, claws scraping against the metal walls. Ethan lunged forward, striking its leg again with the pipe. The creature roared, thrashing violently, sending shards of metal and debris flying. Ethan's vision blurred with sweat and rain, yet he never let go of the pipe. "Ethan," Saria's voice rang sharp. "Move." He dove just in time as she unleashed one final surge of energy. The blue light struck the beast in its chest, burning, piercing, and shocking it. A terrible, guttural scream echoed through the valley. The predator stumbled, its massive form shaking, and then collapsed outside the shelter, defeated. Silence fell. Ethan lay on the floor, chest heaving, muscles trembling with exhaustion. He looked up at Saria, who was leaning against the wall, drained, her glowing hand now dim. Her eyes found his, and for a moment everything, the storm, the predator, the danger, melted away. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice soft and weak, yet filled with emotion. She reached a trembling hand toward him. Ethan smiled, blood and mud streaked across his face. "Guess humans aren't done surprising the galaxy," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. He held out his hand, helping her sit more comfortably against the wall. She allowed herself to lean against him, a fragile trust passing between them in that small gesture. The fire from the stove flickered, casting warm light on their exhausted faces. Rain still dripped from the broken roof, but inside the shelter, the storm of the world outside had passed. Ethan could feel the pulse of Saria's energy slowing, stabilizing, as if she trusted him enough to rest beside him. I thought I was alone," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "I've survived for months, no one to talk to, no one to fight for. I thought maybe it didn't matter anymore." Saria's hand brushed lightly against his arm, glowing softly. "Human heart strong," she said. Her words were simple yet carried weight. "Not only body but heart, you care even now." Ethan looked at her, exhaustion making his features soft. "I care because you're here, not just an alien, not just a stranger. You survived this night. That matters to me." For the first time in months, Ethan felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Hope. Not the fragile hope that faded with the wind, not the quiet hope of survival alone. This was hope born of connection, born of fighting beside someone who needed him as much as he needed her. Outside, the rain softened. The valley lay quiet again. Inside the shelter, two very different beings, a human and an alien, sat together, wounded, exhausted, but alive. Together. And that night, Ethan realized something crucial. Life was no longer just about surviving storms or predators. It was about protecting someone else. It was about trust and courage and the strange, powerful bond that could form between even the most unlikely allies. And as he looked at Saria, glowing faintly, breathing softly, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Morning arrived quietly, pale and soft, like a promise after the chaos of the storm. The valley was still wet and gray, mud clinging to broken trees, but the violence of the night had passed. Ethan stepped outside the small shelter first, letting the cool air wash over him. The world felt different in daylight, less threatening, more real. He breathed deeply, feeling the weight of exhaustion in his chest, the adrenaline of last night fading, replaced by a strange, calm clarity. Saria followed slowly, leaning on him for support. Her glowing skin now flickered faintly in the weak light, the energy she had used to fight the predator fading with every breath. She moved cautiously, her eyes scanning the valley for any sign of danger. The predator was gone, vanished into the fog of the dawn, leaving only the marks of destruction behind. Ethan looked at her, his eyes soft. He had never met anyone like her, not human, not alien. She was fragile, and yet she had survived, fought, and trusted him. His chest tightened at the thought. He had lived in this broken valley for months, maybe years, always alone, always cautious. And now this alien woman, someone who should have been a stranger, perhaps even an enemy, was here depending on him. Her ship lay in ruins across the valley, twisted metal and broken panels sticking out like the ribs of some fallen beast. Smoke rose in thin spirals from its cracked hull, the faint smell of burnt fuel and metal still hanging in the air. Saria's gaze lingered on it, sadness and frustration flickering across her glowing eyes. "I must return to my people," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper, fragile yet firm. "Ship broken, signal weak." She looked at Ethan, searching his face, unsure how to ask what she needed. "I need help, human help if possible." Ethan hesitated. His eyes wandered to the ruined valley, to the remains of the predator's attack, to the life he had carved out here in isolation. He had survived by himself, yes. He had been cautious, careful, alone. And yet, the thought of helping her, of repairing the beacon, of reconnecting her with her people, made his chest feel full in a way he had forgotten. "I'll help," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "We'll fix the signal. I'll help you get home." Saria blinked, her glowing eyes brightening faintly. "You do this for me?" she asked, awe and disbelief in her voice. "For us," Ethan replied, surprising even himself. "Not just for you, for whatever this is, for what we could be." His words hung in the quiet morning air, fragile but sincere. She stepped closer, her glowing fingers brushing lightly against his cheek. The warmth from her touch lingered, almost like sunlight in the cold, gray valley. "Human, different from what we were told," she said softly. "Human heart strong." Her words trembled with honesty, admiration, and something deeper, something unspoken. Ethan looked down at her hand, then into her eyes. He felt the weight of what she said. Humanity had been diminished, spoken of as weak, short-lived, fragile. And yet here she was, a being from the stars, telling him that even in this broken world, humans could shine. His chest swelled with pride, and a strange, unsteady hope began to grow inside him. They moved together toward the remains of her ship, careful with every step, their bond strengthened by the shared trials of the storm and the predator. The wreckage was daunting, a mess of broken technology, sparks, and twisted metal. But Ethan had survived worse, and now he was not alone. Saria guided him where she could, showing him what needed fixing. Together, human and alien, they examined the pieces, planning how to rebuild a signal strong enough to reach her people. As they worked, their hands brushed over metal, over tools, over each other. Every contact carried meaning, trust, gratitude, maybe even something more. Neither spoke of it aloud, but the unspoken tension hummed between them, stronger than the sound of the drizzle, stronger than the valley itself. By midday, a fragile bond had grown into something tangible. They shared a quiet smile over a repaired panel, laughter when a tool slipped and clattered to the mud. And Ethan realized that life, even in a ruined world, was no longer just about survival. It was about connection, about caring for someone else, about hope. When they finally rested, sitting together in the shadow of the broken ship, Ethan looked at Saria. "We survive," he said quietly. "Together we survive, and maybe we find more." Saria's glowing eyes met his, full of warmth, respect, and something softer, something almost human. "Yes," she whispered, "together." The morning light touched their faces. The storm was over, but a new choice lay before them, one that could change everything. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt ready to embrace it. By the time the sun had fully risen, the valley glowed in pale gold, wet mud reflecting the light like broken mirrors. Ethan and Saria sat together near the broken ship, both exhausted but alive. The work of repairing the signal beacon had taken all morning, their hands blistered, their muscles aching, but each movement had been shared. They had laughed quietly at mistakes, exchanged small smiles, and felt something grow between them, something fragile and yet unbreakable. Saria looked at the sky, the clouds scattering in thin wisps. Her glowing skin seemed to shimmer brighter in the soft sunlight. "Signal ready," she said, voice small but filled with relief. "Ship come soon, rescue yes." She paused, then looked at Ethan with something she rarely showed, vulnerability. I want you to come with me." Ethan froze, his chest tightened. He had spent years alone in this broken valley, surviving storms, predators, and solitude. Leaving it behind would mean stepping into the unknown, a vast universe far from anything he had ever known. Yet when he looked into her glowing eyes, he felt a pull stronger than fear, stronger than logic. She was not just an alien, not just a stranger. She was someone who had survived beside him, who had trusted him, who had changed him without even trying. He swallowed hard, fighting the doubt in his mind. Could he leave the world he had fought so hard to survive in? Could he trust himself to follow her into the stars? And yet, he could not imagine staying, not when she offered him a chance at something more than mere survival. "I'll go," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "I'll go with you." Saria's eyes widened, and then a light of joy spread across her face. She stepped closer and wrapped her arms around him, pulling him gently into an embrace. For a moment, the universe outside ceased to exist. The past, the storms, the predators, the years of loneliness vanished into memory. Only this moment remained, warmth, trust, and the connection they had forged through struggle and survival. "You really," she whispered, voice trembling, "you leave all behind." "I leave it behind," Ethan replied softly. "But I take this," he said, touching his chest, "and you." His hand rested over her glowing one. "That's worth more than anything I've known here." They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other, the silence between them filled with unspoken words. Gratitude, relief, hope, and something deeper. Something neither of them yet fully understood. Outside, the valley stretched quietly, broken yet peaceful, as if acknowledging the bond that had formed here. Soon the faint hum of the rescue ship reached their ears. Saria stepped back, her glowing hand trembling slightly as she activated the beacon fully. Sparks of blue light leapt from the device, shining across the valley. The ship, distant at first, became visible, descending slowly through the clearing clouds. Its engines hummed a soft, steady rhythm like a heartbeat in the sky. Ethan watched, awe-filled, as the ship drew closer. He glanced at Saria, who seemed smaller now, yet more radiant than ever. "We did it," he said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Yes," she agreed. "Together we survived, together we changed." The ship landed gently nearby, its ramp extending to the ground with a soft hiss. Saria turned to Ethan, her eyes glowing brighter, almost pleading. "Now, Choice, you come." Ethan nodded. His heart was pounding, fear and excitement mingled in a fierce, beautiful way. He stepped forward with her, leaving the broken valley behind, walking toward a future that seemed larger than the world itself. As they boarded the ship, the valley stretched below them, silent and solemn. Ethan looked back once, taking in the mud, the broken trees, the remnants of last night's chaos. This place had been his world. This place had tested him, taught him survival, loneliness, and courage. But the real lesson, he realized, was not about surviving alone. It was about surviving together. The ramp closed and the ship lifted off, rising slowly into the sky. Saria stood beside him, her hand in his, warmth radiating through the connection they shared. Outside the window, the valley became smaller, the rivers like silver threads, the forests patches of green and gray. Ethan felt a thrill he had never known before, a mixture of fear, excitement, and hope. "You think humans can survive anything?" Saria asked quietly, almost to herself. Ethan looked at her, a grin forming despite the exhaustion. "Humans survive," he said firmly, "but we survive better with someone who believes in us, like you." Her glowing eyes softened, tears catching faintly in the corners. She leaned against him, quiet and safe, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt that he belonged somewhere. Somewhere beyond loneliness, beyond storms, beyond predators. Somewhere he could finally hope again. The ship rose higher, leaving the broken valley behind. And as the stars began to appear, faint and distant in the pale sky, Ethan realized something powerful. A storm had brought an alien to his door. A predator had tested their courage. And the valley, broken and silent, had given him something far greater than survival. It had given him a reason to live. A reason to hope. A future. And for the first time in a long, long while, he did not feel alone.